Hi, this is the JNUC 2022 talk for user-proof onboarding, backup plans for zero touch for IT. I am Adam Caudill. I'm an endpoint engineer at Cover My Meds. I've worked here for about 4 years. One of the biggest compliments I've ever received is my middle school math teacher told me, if you spend as much time doing your work as you spend looking for shortcuts, you'd have straight A's. While that mindset wasn't the best for my grades, it's been great for me as an endpoint engineer. Sometimes just fixing a problem is so much more work. If you find the shortcut and create a solution, you can make it so the problem never shows up at all. Cover My Meds is based in Columbus, Ohio. We have about 2,000 employees. We're over 99% Mac, and we've doubled in size in the last 4 years. In 2020, like many of you, Cover My Meds went fully remote for the first time. I've been in charge of our annual hardware refresh, where we replace the oldest few hundred laptops in our environment every year. In fall of 2020, we remotely replaced around 350 laptops by direct shipping them from Apple straight to our employees. I sat in my house and I erased the same few test laptops over and over again, designing and testing a process, and it worked every time until we actually sent it to people for real, and then a whole bunch of stuff broke. I had to create a process that would work for that and solve those problems, and it's been going through changes and improvements ever since. Another of the biggest compliments I've received is a senior systems engineer from our core infrastructure team reached out to me and said, I passed on getting a new laptop, but Gary, another senior systems engineer, was bragging about how smoothly their setup went, and now I'm wondering how to get back on the list. Getting a new laptop is awesome, but it also kind of sucks. This is when I knew I'd crossed the threshold where I'd made the process suck enough less that people who had been avoiding it were opting back in. So I assume if you're watching this talk that you are trying to move to a zero touch for IT workflow or improve your existing workflow. We're going to do an overview of zero touch for IT using Jamf Connect. There are ways to do it without Jamf Connect, but I'm doing this talk with the assumption that we're using Jamf Connect. We're going to talk about the problems I ran into and automating solutions for them. And we're going to talk about the user experience. One thing to keep in mind is that the process we create for this needs to work for the users on their first day and for replacement computers for whatever reason they're being replaced for existing users. For some of us, for us, some of the first day Mac users have and love Macs, but some of them also may be using a Mac for the first time. This is a basic flowchart of what a zero-touch workflow looks like. The computer goes through Apple Device Enrollment, or DEP, your pre-stage installs, then user creation needs to happen. The computer needs to get to the standard configuration, and then the user needs to get things to their configuration, and then the user can actually work. During pre-stage enrollment, you can do enrollment customization. I'm not going to go in depth on this because there are other great talks about all of the things you can do. I would encourage you to do something here to brand it and give your users instructions. We have a YouTube video that plays, and if you add the $autoplay equals 1 to the end of the URL, then the video immediately starts playing when the pre-stage screen loads. A team member comes on screen and says, "Welcome to Cover My Meds," and lays out expectations. Lets them know that if they're new, then the password information will be emailed to them the morning that they start the company, and that they're going to need Okta Verify on their smartphone, and that this whole process is going to take 20 to 30 minutes, so please make sure you have enough time to finish it. Then pre-stage packages install. You need to have Jamf Connect and a package with custom reference files, and then your configuration profiles also install. The reference file package is going to include your branding, icons, notifications, maybe scripts, any local files that you're going to need to reference throughout the various steps of this process. We put all of that into library, application support, company name. You can add a pre-install or post-install script to this custom package to make your computer install Rosetta 2 as part of pre-stage enrollment. I have an example script for this on my GitHub. This package does need to be signed. You cannot install any package as part of a pre-stage enrollment that isn't signed. You can sign it with the certificate from your built-in Jamf Pro certificate authority, but you do need to make sure to sign it. With the configuration profiles that you're installing, you need to make sure that they're both initially applied as part of pre-stage enrollment, but that the computer is also in scope. If for some reason the computer is not in scope, it will apply it as part of the pre-stage, and then immediately Jamf will pull that configuration profile off of the computer. You don't need to have every single profile that the computer is going to need on there in your pre-stage, just the ones to get through the user creation portion of the setup. So you're definitely going to want your Jamf Connect profile, your Jamf Connect license. You might want network settings. That's less important for remote users, but you still may want to have those on there. We actually preset a lot of notification settings, and that way, as applications install, the user isn't overwhelmed by every single application asking for permission to do notifications. The user is able to opt out of these notification settings later if they want to. PPPC settings for various applications or system processes. If something is asking for permission during your setup every single time, just try to grant that permission in advance. And if you're using File Vault, you want to have your File Vault settings and escrow key in there as well. One configuration profile I want to specifically call out as an example is the one that allows Jamf Connect to enable File Vault at user creation from the login window. You can enable that in your Jamf Connect settings, but users will get a prompt that looks like this, asking if they want to enable File Vault. If this happens, a lot of times they click yes, but they might stop and ask if they should do that, which slows down the whole process. Or worse, they might not ask and click no. And then you have a computer that's not File Vault enabled, and that's something else that has to be fixed later. You can allow this with the identifier com.apple.authorizationhost, the bundle ID listed here, and system policy all files allow. Then when the user logs in for the first time, File Vault is enabled, and you never see this prompt. So that's pre-stage enrollment. How does it break? The two most common things that happen to me are that computers fail to enroll or that packages fail to install. If every computer is failing to enroll, then something is not configured correctly. Now, things have gotten better since we first rolled this out in 2020, but sometimes computers don't enroll, and sometimes when they enroll, packages don't install. Exact numbers are hard, but I estimated that for a 2020 refresh, out of 350 computers, about 7 to 8% had a pre-stage enrollment problem or hardware issues straight out of the box. For a 2021 refresh, that was a lower amount, about 4 to 5%. Frequently, if enrollment doesn't work, then the user can just go back to the language screen and forward again or restart the computer, and it will enroll on a second try. But they don't always stop to ask for instructions before doing that. So we created user-facing instructions for enrollment. They're in our internal documentation, but we also have a PDF that we can send people. It walks through enrolling the computer through Jamf Cloud. We have a button in self-service to install Jamf Connect and start the initial configuration process. If the account they created through the setup assistant matches their IDP credentials, then Jamf Connect links up those accounts after it's installed. If for some reason they made a different username, then they can log out, log back in, and Jamf Connect will create a new account on the computer that matches their IDP credentials. If things aren't working right, you can also just have them erase all content and settings and try again. Erase all content and settings through system preferences is amazing for troubleshooting the setup process or just reusing computers in general. In your Jamf Pro re-enrollment settings, you can also set it so that to automatically clear policy logs and extension attributes on enrollment. This makes erase all content and settings a one-step reuse computer process. Now, there's reasons why you might not want to clear those, but it also can make things a lot easier depending on your environment. When pre-stage packages fail to install, Jamf Connect doesn't install. So users are just sitting at the macOS login screen, and the only account on the computer is most likely the local admin created during pre-stage. So nothing they do will log in, and you can't give them that admin password. I created a policy that runs once per computer. Scope to last enrollment is less than 24 hours, and it checks the Jamf Connect installation and fixes it. The script is on my GitHub, but it checks if Jamf Connect is installed. If it's not installed, it installs it with the custom trigger Jamf Connect. So you have to set up that policy to be triggered. And then we reset the auth changer to make sure Jamf Connect controls the login window. And then we kill the login window. If Jamf Connect is installed, let's make sure Jamf Connect is in charge of the auth changer. And if it's not, set the auth changer and kill the login window. So as a result of this policy, if the package fails to install after a few minutes of sitting at the macOS login screen, then the policy runs, Jamf Connect installs, the login window refreshes to our custom branded Jamf Connect login screen. And at this point, the user can log in with their IDP credentials, and Jamf Connect will create their local account on the computer. Now, for user creation, you need to configure Jamf Connect to work with your IDP. I'm not going to go in depth on that. There's been other great JNUC talks that go in detail, and I'm sure there's another one this year. If you have MFA requirements on your IDP, even if you disable them on the Jamf Connect app specifically, then MFA will still need to be set up before the user can log in. When a user logs into the Jamf Connect login screen, it should prompt them to set up MFA, but sometimes it does not. In your Jamf Connect configuration, you can set the help URL to be Okta or your IDP tenant. And this way, they can click help, log in there for the first time, and it will prompt them to set up MFA or security questions or whatever else you require. You can also set a local help file. If the computer is offline, the help button will open up that local help file. This is part of our reference file package, and we have a PDF that instructs the user how to get online, set up MFA, and then proceed with our initial configuration. So at this point, the user's logged in, they have an account on the computer, and the computer needs to get to our standard configuration. Now, everyone's standard configuration is going to look different, but you're going to need to install your core apps, whatever those are. You're going to need to enforce security settings like File Vault, if the user is a local admin or not, which accounts have secure tokens, set up VPN. You need to check for errors and resolve them. And you need to present the user with instructions about what they need to do to finish the standard configuration. So how do you get there? How can you make sure that all of these things happen? I recommend using a tool like the Jamf Enrollment Kickstart. Johan McGuire created this and did a great JNUC talk about it a few years ago. Basically, it is a launch daemon that runs Jamf policy-event initial config on repeat until it is removed. You can add all the policies you need to this custom trigger, and it will run it and complete them and do the bulk of the dirty work of getting your computer configured. Now, when you have multiple policies that run on the same trigger, they run in alphabetical or numerical order. So it's recommended to number the policies, and that will control the order that they happen in. So Jamf also has added the option to rerun the policy on failure. If you say retry event with 10 retry attempts, then each policy will try up to 11 times until it gets a successful exit code. This means that if any part of the initial configuration fails, it will try again. Now, most likely, you aren't going to add packages to these initial config policies. You're going to have them run custom triggers for other policies that are the actual installers for the applications. That way you have one policy controlling the install, and it is referenced everywhere. So you have your main in policy with custom trigger install application, and your self-service policy, your policy to update old versions, and your initial config policy all just run the main install application custom trigger. But if a policy just runs a Unix command Jamf policy-event install application, then that policy will succeed, regardless of if the policy it triggers succeeds, fails, or even runs. So if the initial config policy succeeds, but the policy that installs the application fails, then the initial config policy will not run again because it had a successful exit code. The full script for this is available on my GitHub, but this is the important part. We have a script that takes the application name and policy trigger as variables. And then if the application is installed, it exits successfully. If it's not, then it runs the policy trigger and takes that exit code. It then checks again to make sure the application is installed. And this gives the initial config policy a more accurate result. So if the install application trigger fails or isn't found, the initial config policy will fail and it will try again. Now, you might need to tweak this for something like antivirus that doesn't install into the applications folder, but the same principle still applies. So you want to automate everything you can, but for the things you can't automate, you need to make sure the user knows what to do. There are lots of different options to give the users options. I've tried some of them, I've seen demos for others, and there's more that are not listed here. We use IBM Notifier. There's a IBM notifier panel happening later on during JNUC. I will be as part of that, and we'll go more in depth on IBM notifier there. But it allows us to include images and control where on the screen the pop-ups happen. So for example, for our VPN setup with Global Protect, users get a prompt in which they need to enter their password and click Always Allow. When completing the VPN setup, we pop up this alert with an example screenshot and the option they need to select highlighted. We do watermark these screenshots as examples because some of our users have tried to click on the screenshot instead of the actual pop-up. And we also can make sure that the pop-up appears in the top left corner of the screen so it doesn't cover up the actual dialog box that we are telling them what to do with. So initial config runs, and it's going to run through each policy up to 11 times until it completes. At the end of each loop through initial config, I have a script that checks to see if everything is complete. If it's not completed, then on the 11th loop, users get this error report with what the issue is and how to reach out for assistance. I have an example script for this on my GitHub. If it is completed successfully, you need to let the users know that too. And then initial configuration is marked as complete and the launch daemon is removed. We also need to inform the users of next steps. They can go to self-service and install any additional software they need. We also set their homepage to an internal resource that has instructions on next steps for various tasks that they need to do. The standard configuration of your computer is no one's actual configuration to do their job. So you have to give them next steps on other things that they need to do. For replacement computers, they need instructions on transferring files. If you don't tell them how to do it, they might not do it, and then they won't actually use their new computer. Or worse, they may do the data transfer in a way that your security team would not approve of. You also want to document common questions. My general rule is that if 3 people ask me how to do something, then that means there's more people out there who aren't asking. So I make step-by-step instructions with screenshots, and I put a link to it on our computer setup page. Things like transferring Apple Notes, stickies, text substitutions, Outlook rules, SSH keys, bookmarks. And you want to automate everything that you can. If you can make the instructions, click this button in self-service, that is a better user experience than telling them to go look through their library folder for a .db file. As an example, I've created policies in self-service that back up and restore a user's browser data. I have example scripts for this on my GitHub. It zips the application support folder for that browser and puts it in the user's OneDrive. And then they run the restore policy on the new computer. It goes and gets the backup from OneDrive and puts it in the correct location. This will bring over a user's bookmarks, history, and even what tabs they have open. It does not move saved passwords because they live in the keychain. I have found that this was one of the biggest pain points for users in switching computers, so I've tried to make moving your browser data as easy as possible. You need to constantly iterate and improve on this process. You want to watch a user who's not on your tech team go through this process and don't help them. It's so hard to sit behind them and not go, just click right there. But you have to see where they're confused, where they click the wrong thing, and when they have too much happening on the same screen at the same time and are overwhelmed. You want to eliminate every click that you can. If you have to tell a user who sets up the computer to click a button, try to figure out a way to make it that button click automatic. 2 examples for this. We use Slack. You can preset your Slack workspace so that way when the user opens Slack for the first time, it takes them to the correct Slack workspace automatically. This makes the process much easier. We also use Microsoft Office, and you can have the email address the computer is assigned to in Jamf pre-fill for Outlook and other Office products. This way, the user just needs to authenticate with their password or your IDP. You have to get feedback from your users. Learn what they like and what they don't like. You also want to get feedback from your help desk. They're going to see the patterns of where people have issues and where the opportunities are. After using this process for a little over a year, we had a meeting with our help desk team and we overhauled the whole thing. The core engine of how it works and what it does did not change, but the instructions the user receive, when they get them, the order the policies happened in, were all redesigned to line up better with the user experience our help desk team was trying to deliver. So at this point, I hope you're on board with switching over to Zero Touch. or found ways to improve your existing zero-touch workflows. But there are probably some people out there who are thinking through specific hurdles or requirements in their environment that would make this plan not work for them. So fake it until you make it. You can loosely provision the computers, but still have the users go through a zero-touch account creation and user experience. This allows you to make sure the computer enrolls correctly if that's a big concern for you. This also allows you to run all software updates on computers before you send them out. Maybe you have computers that have been sitting in the box for 4 months and you want to have them on the newest OS. Or maybe you have a large class and you don't want to sit there waiting while 50 people all download Microsoft Office at the same time and it kills your Wi-Fi network. This can also be used to make a soft transition to zero touch for IT. We started doing zero touch for replacement computers in 2020, but it wasn't until earlier in 2022 that we started doing zero touch for new hires. With initial configuration, as soon as you log in, it starts running. But if you're not the user of the computer, then you don't want those setup things to happen in a different account. So I've created initial config policy 00. Because they run in numerical order, it runs first. It makes sure that the logged in user should be running initial config. And if not, it uninstalls it and kills the process. So if you want to pre-provision the computer, you log in as the local admin account. Initial config policy 00 will figure out that you are the local admin and prevent the rest of initial configuration from happening. You then run a script to pre-provision the computer. I have ours set to a custom trigger. You could put it into self-service if you wanted to. I have an example script to do these things on my GitHub. That script will install your core applications. It will create a setup account for file vault access. It caches the initial config package, and then it verifies that Jamf Connect is set to control the auth changer at the login screen. This full script for policy 00 is on my GitHub, but this here will see who the logged in user is and react appropriately. We have 2 admin name variables listed here for when we rotate our local admin account, which we do on a regular basis. I have this script scoped to all computers with the initial config launch agent cached. So this script sees who the logged in user is, and if it's an eligible user, then it installs the cache package, which starts the initial config process for the logged in user. So for the user experience, the pre-provisioned computer is shipped to a user. You tell them there's an account named setup with whatever generic password you set the password to. They log in at the file vault screen as setup. They log in to Jamf Connect as themselves. Jamf Connect creates their local account on the computer that matches their IDP credentials. The initial config process proceeds as normal, except faster, because they're not waiting for downloads of the key software because all of that's already been installed. And the setup account is removed during initial configuration with a policy scoped to computers that have a setup account installed. This way, computers provisioned in advance and computers that are new in box have different steps to getting the user logged in, but a nearly identical experience after the fact. I have links here to my GitHub, which has all of the scripts that I referenced for this talk and more. Johan McGuire's JNUC talk about the Jamf Enrollment Kickstarter, which goes into more details behind how that process works, and a talk from Sean Rabbit about a deep dive into configuring Jamf Connect for your IDP. Thank you so much for listening. It was an honor to present to you as part of JNUC 2022.